Hi and welcome to session number 9 of the Mayamiko Introduction to Natural Dyeing course, and this session is all about sampling. So I've spoken to you a lot about the sampling process and its importance over the duration of this course, and really now that we've learned about the whole process, all of the different stages involved in the natural dyeing process, we now get to this exciting stage of sampling and figuring out what colours and what recipes are going to work really well for us in Malawi at Mayamiko. So when I talk about sampling, I am talking about the creation of recipes. It's really important for us to try lots of different combinations of different plants, different food waste, different tannins and different mordants to figure out what are going to be the best colours for Mayamiko for you to create, and which ones are going to be the most reliable, the most consistent in colour and in shade, and which ingredients are going to be the most available, so that we know that we can either produce the same colour year round, or we can produce that colour in seasons. So I've pulled together some key points here that we're going to go through, and then we're going to take a look at a format which you can use to record your sampling process, and then we'll look at some of the samples which I've pulled together and started trialling with the organic fabric that you'll be using in Malawi. So if we firstly take a look at this photo here of all of the little white squares cut up and labelled, that's a really good indication of what is going to be involved through this process. And so, key points. Firstly, it's all about making a record of all the different samples you want to do, a combination of different mordants, tannins and plant colours. The more variety of samples, the greater chance of us finding a recipe that works. A table format works well for this in terms of recording your findings. The next key point is to decide on your fabric. It is best that you're sampling with the exact fabric that you'll be using long term. And so in Mayamiko's case, we know that we'll be using a certain weight of organic fabric, and so we're going to be doing the sampling with that fabric. Ideally, each sample square will be 15 centimetres by 15 centimetres in size, but they can be smaller if you're limited on fabric. As all samples require the initial washing process, wash the fabric first before cutting it into squares. This helps with the fabric not fraying at the edges. I'm sure you can imagine that washing, lots and lots of little squares of fabric, they often get into a bit of a mess and the edges fray. And so let's wash the big piece of fabric first using that process in session 3, and then we can cut it up into the right sizes. So you can either dry the fabric before you cut it up, or you can cut it when it's damp. Either way works. I also recommend finding different methods of making note of, which samples are going to be going into the alum, which samples are going into the tannin, which have got both, because obviously we're going to be taking those labels off the front of the squares. And so once they're in the dye, we need a way of remembering, which sample is which. And so often I do little snips in the fabric. So for instance, if one is just going into alum, I put 1 snip. If it's going to alum and tannin, I put 2 snips. You can sometimes also write with a biro pen on the corner of the fabric as well, and that tends to work okay. But it's just finding a way of making sure you keep track of all of the samples so you don't get confused. So this is an example of the type of table which we can create to make sure that we test all of the different combinations for sampling. So for instance here we've got the number in the first column of the sample, and then we've got the mordant which we're going to use. So for most of these samples we're using alum, but then we're going to be doing some trials with no mordant, and then also we can experiment using soya as a mordant. And then we're going to look at what is the tannin we're going to use for this sample. And we can switch up the tannins because that will give us a different result in the final, for the final fabric colour. And so for this first row, we've got sample number 1, which is mordanted with alum, with a ground nut tannin, and then we're going to use the onion skins as the final dye colour. For sample number 2, we're going to mordant with alum, but we're going to use either the bavunguti fruit or tea or coffee for the tannin, depending on what's available. And then we're going to again use onion skins. So you can see here that we've got onion skins 5 times, and we're just altering the type of mordant or tannin to give a different result. And so by the end of the sampling process, we'll have 5 different pieces of onion skin dyed fabric, and each of them will have gone through a different process to get to that point. Then we can look at those 5 pieces and decide on which is the best colour for us to use at Mayamiko, and then we can develop the final recipe from that. You can see that I've done the same again in this table with the avocado, altering the tannins and the alums. And so it's about going through for every colour all of these different possible colour combinations to experiment. You have to think of yourself a bit like a scientist doing lots of experiments, and then it's good to keep track and give it a tick when it's completed, and make sure that once you've got the sample, you put it into a book or stick it onto a piece of paper, and make sure that you have really thoroughly labelled it, telling, you know, what plant it is, what mordant, what tannin. In the case where you've got multiple different fabrics that you're trialing, then obviously you would then do 10 different samples for onion skins, and you would do 5 using one type of fabric, 5 using the other type of fabric. So I just wanted to show you quickly what I mean. So this was my experiments using the organic fabric that you're going to be using in Mayamiko. So it most definitely works, and we got some really beautiful colours. So I was using 2 different types of fabrics. So at the top of the paper I wrote the plant and then the type of fabric. So this was a pre-shrunk, starch removed organic cotton. And then I've got, you know, 4 different variations. I've got the top square with no alum, the second square with no alum and tannin, the third square with no alum and salt, and then the 4th square with alum. And you can see here with the madder root that the alum has made a really big difference. It's really darkened the colour of the fabric. And again, looking at the pomegranate skins, which are giving this beautiful, beautiful yellow, these results are quite different. You can see that actually, even with no alum, the colour is pretty strong and quite close to the alum sample. But you can also see that the no alum and tannin has given a really beautiful result. And so for pomegranate skins, our recipe could be really different to madder root. Again, here we're looking at eucalyptus leaf on the left, which the alum has made the colour go much greyer. So kind of it's really dulled the colour. And then the other colours are kind of much more beigey, much lighter. And then this orangey colour was a trial that I did mixing both madder root and pomegranate skins. And so first I dyed the fabric with pomegranate skins, and then once that was finished, I then put it into the madder root to mix the yellow and red to get an orange, and those are the results. Again with avocado stone and onion skins, and I found it very difficult to get a really nice colour from onion skins and avocado stones using this fabric, but this will also be really different using the avocado stones and onion skins in Malawi. So I'll be really intrigued to see the differences of colour that you get in Malawi in compared to what I got in Sri Lanka. And then finally, just looking at this sample on the left, which was using a tannin. So in Sri Lanka, I used a fruit called Nelly, and then mixing it with an iron water solution. And to make an iron water, it's really simple. It's basically finding lots of rusty nails and mixing them with some vinegar and leaving them in water. And then that combined with the tannin creates a grey colour. And so we can see that we got a really lovely grey from that. And then this is an example of where I got a bit confused with my sampling and forgot to write down what it was. So you can see at the top I've written pom question mark, tamarind question mark. And when you've got lots of squares going at the same time and sometimes lots of colours that are similar, it can get confusing. So you just need to keep on top of making sure you write down what is what. And so sampling is a very exciting part of the process because it really shows you the variety of colours that you can get. And it does take some time, and it's good to dedicate, a period of time to doing this really well. And it might be that you have to do a few different, stages of sampling. So you might do the first lot and you might be really happy with the colours, or you might be disappointed with the colours, and then you might need to do sampling again. And we can speak and we can, troubleshoot and find different ways around sourcing different tannins and different mordants to help really generate the colour. So I hope that video got you excited about starting the sampling process. These images are some of my favourite colours that we can create from natural dyes. So great, happy sampling, and I can't wait to see your results.